Hi, I'm Karie Bible for Film Masters, and I am currently in the Beverly Hills home of the great Cora Sue Collins, who was a wonderful child actress from 1932 until 1945. So we're going to talk about her discovery, her career, her co-stars, her life in Hollywood, and her life after Hollywood. So Cora Sue, it's so nice to chat with you.
Oh, it's so nice to see you, dear. Such fun, Karie.
Yes. Tell me how you first got discovered. What age were you and how did that happen?
Well, I was 3, and it happened because my father gave his secretary a mink coat for Christmas. And
Not a good look.
we lived in a small town, and there was one good furrier. The furrier loved my mother, and he took showed her, this is what your husband did. Well, my mother was livid. So she went with the furrier, with the receipts, to my husband. And my husband said, yes, I did that. So he didn't say I'm sorry or anything. My mother evidently was furious. So she went home and she decided she'd show him. I had a sister 9 years older than me, Madge. So she packed my sister up and me, and we went to Hollywood. And when we were in Hollywood, she was on Highland Avenue, and she was registering my sister, who was older than me, in high school, in middle school. And a car came screeching up to the sidewalk. And I remember in those days, it was many years ago, ladies really dressed up to go out. And this beautiful lady, I remember her with this huge hat on the side of her head, got out of the car, and she indicated me with her finger, and she said to my mother, would you like to put your little girl in pictures? My mother said, well, yes. So this lady said, well, get in the car. They have a casting going on at Universal. So we got in the car. 3 hours later, we came back with a contract. Unexpected Father, starring Zazu Pitts and Slim Somerville. They were the Lucy and Desi of their era. And Cora Sue Collins. Wow. It only happened in Hollywood.
Only in Hollywood.
I had no intention.
Wow. Sometimes I think things find us and not us finding them.
Karie, you have a point.
So tell me about the other films. You had an impressive run and co-starred opposite a who's who in Hollywood. I love your story about working with Peter Lorre on the 1935 film Mad Love.
Oh, that's such fun. Peter Lorre is such a nice man. And he was so different. He was the antithesis of the parts that he played. He was the most genteel, sweet, caring, loving person. And here he played these mad,
villainous.
But he was wonderful. Anyway, we were rehearsing for the film, and I'm on the gurney, and he's holding a scalpel in his hand, and I'm saying, then I don't need to be afraid or something. And he accidentally dropped the scalpel. The scalpel went right through the coat I was wearing, the whatever you call it, that you're operated in, and cut me. I still have the scar. Now, nothing serious, but it's just a souvenir.
A souvenir of Peter Lorre. You were cut and scarred by Peter Lorre.
Yes, and he was so sweet, and he was so upset about it. And I kept trying to, you didn't do it on purpose. He's so sweet. He's such a sweet, dear man. So that was my story with Peter Lorre.
Oh, that's
I loved him. He was a dear, gentle, sweet man.
And also, tell me about working with Colleen Moore, because our friends at Film Masters have released the version of The Scarlet Letter that co-starred Henry B. Walthall, starred Colleen Moore, and you.
Yes. Well, Colleen was a lovely person. And I got to know her quite well when we were doing the film. And she was in the throes of finalizing her dollhouse. Do you know about her dollhouse?
Yes, but talk about that for people who don't know about the dollhouse, because that's a big story.
Colleen Moore started collecting miniatures, and she built a dollhouse, which is now on permanent exhibit. I can't remember what city.
I think Chicago.
It is Chicago. And it's a fabulous exhibit. Hundreds of thousands of people go every year to see it. But while she was doing this, we were filming The Scarlet Letter. So she took me through every stage of it, and she even gave me a tiny little miniature silver filigree chain long that was just a bit too big for the scale of her dollhouse furniture. Anyway, I loved her. Now, lap dissolved, many years go by. We filmed Scarlet Letter. I go on to work as over maybe 20 years lapse. And I marry a wonderful man, Harry Nace, who lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And the first dinner party we went to after our wedding was at some charity function. And the two of us walked in, and I heard this voice, Cora Sue, and it was Colleen Moore.
Where were you, dear? Picking flowers. Aren't they lovely? Who made the flowers, Mother? God, dear. Who made me? God the Heavenly Father made all things. I found the flowers in the field. Where did you find me?
She had remarried and lived there, and it was great fun because I got to see her all the rest of her life. And she was a lovely person. Dear and sweet and kind.
That's a wonderful story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great story. And I'm very glad this film is on DVD now so more people can see it and enjoy it.
Well, I had a treat. I got to see it on the big screen, which was wonderful for me because I'd never seen it. In those days, we worked 6 days a week.
I'm sure.
Monday through Saturday, everybody did. And on Sunday morning, I'd go to Mass, Roman Catholic. And then if you think I was going to spend my one afternoon of the week going to see some me on a screen, no way. Anyway, a lot of times I didn't even have Sunday afternoon because Mr. Mayor would have me either teaching his grandchildren how to ride horseback or entertaining dignitaries, whatever. So I really had no childhood at all. I don't know what you call it. Somehow or other I grew up. Anyway, that's the story of my childhood.
Well, also, I would like to ask you about one of your great things you are known for is being Baby Garbo, because you played the young version of Garbo in Queen Christina, and you were also in, was it?
Anna Karenina.
Anna Karenina, yes. So tell us about that and tell us about Garbo.
I can bore you for the rest of the day.
Oh, you won't bore me.
I love Greta Garbo. She was so dear, so sweet. First time I met her, I remember being on a soundstage. You know how the old-fashioned soundstages were? Mm-hmm. They were like an airplane hangar.
Oh, yeah.
And huge, enormous, and from floor to ceiling, black velvet drapes, curtains. And here were all these little girls lined up, and one by one, they were told to leave. And pretty soon, the drapes opened, and a blonde lady came out, and she had a kind of a funny accent. We chatted for a few minutes, and she left. My mother came in, she said, "You got the part." I said, "I did." She said, "Yes, that was Miss Garbo." I said, "Who?" I had no idea who she was, no idea whatsoever. Well, the friendship blossomed. Firstly, I played her as a child. We became friends. She was so lovely and so sweet. And years later, I bought a piece of property in Switzerland where I used to like to go summers, and I like to ski, and I like water ski, and I like to walk. I love to walk. And anyway, she missed me, so she bought an apartment near me. And she would call me and she'd say, "You want to walk?" I'd say, "Yes." She'd say, "I pick you up." So she would pick me up and we'd go walking. And then she'd say, "You want some tea?" I'd say, "Yes." So we'd go back to my apartment and I would make tea. And she would be grumbling to herself. And I said, "What is it, dear?" She said, "I don't understand it." She said, "After all these years, they say, 'You, Greta Garbo.'" Well, I didn't have the heart to tell her. But if you wanted to do an impersonation of Greta Garbo, starting from the feet down, she wore these black, they were called brogans, patent leather shoes with a big silk grogane bow on the top.
Okay.
Then men's trousers, a wrap coat, and a slouch hat. Well, of course it was Greta Garbo. And I didn't have the heart to tell her. Oh, I'll tell you another funny story.
Yes.
Miss Garbo had a house in Beverly Hills, and I think it was a Frank Lloyd Wright house. I've never been able to thoroughly research it, but I'm pretty sure it was Frank Lloyd Wright because it was built around a large rectangular swimming pool with a courtyard, and the courtyard was red brick. Now I found the house, and it's now slate, but it used to be red brick. And she had here was the swimming pool, and here was the courtyard, and then she had a big round, large level patio, and a round table, and a light over it, and that's where we would eat lunch. And one day she said at lunch, because we'd been swimming, we'd swim, then we'd get out and we'd go to lunch, and she said, "You never have to, it's a miracle. You do not have to swim 100 laps in an ice cold swimming pool or lake every day." And I'd found out that if you said the last few words of what someone was saying, they would usually continue with their train of thought. And it seemed that she had been told years before, because you have pictures of her swimming nude in an ice cold lake, that if she would swim 100 laps in an ice cold lake every day, that she would have boobs. And of course, have you ever seen a swimmer no, they have shoulders, they don't have boobs. The poor darling, she had a back like a halfback and no boobs at all. And all these years she had been under that delusion.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't dare say anything because firstly it was all anecdotal. I had nothing scientific on which to base it, but think about it. Have you ever seen a swimmer with boobs?
Come to think of it, I have not.
And if you have, I'll bet they're in pants. Whatever.
Well, we are in Beverly Hills, so
Right.
let me ask you, what was it like to work with William Powell and Myrna Loy? You were in the film.
I loved them both.
Tell me the film again that you were in with both of them.
I'll be darned if I can remember at the moment.
I want to say Nora Prentice.
No, that's another one.
No, that's another one.
Right.
Evelyn Prentice. Evelyn Prentice was the film you were in.
It was Evelyn Prentice.
Yes.
Right. Anyway, William Powell was an incredibly sweet man. He would call me and he'd say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "May I come over?" Of course. So he called one day and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm taking the children." I had 2 children, a boy and a girl. "I'm taking the children to a costume party." He said, "May I go?" I said, "Of course." So here I have these pictures, which are funny as can be. Here's William Powell, gorgeous. The 2 children in costume, and me. He was adorable.
Wow, that's such a
I
cool
couldn't
story.
turn around without stepping on him. He was so sweet. I used to see him all the time.
So out of all the stars you worked with, and there are tons, what ones have I not covered yet? We've talked about Garbo and Colleen Moore and Peter Lorre and William Powell. Tell me some of the other super famous names that you worked with.
Just pull any star of that era and ask me.
Betty Davis. I know you were in a Betty Davis film.
Not only that, she was a very dear friend of mine. She gave me my 7th birthday party.
Wow.
She was an adorable lady. Anyway, my mother, she gave it. It wasn't called the Llewell. It later, I think, became the Llewell, but it was some sort of restaurant in those old days where they served Polynesian food. And there was a long table, and Miss Davis was here, I was here, and my mother was all the way at the end. And I thought, my mother will never be able to see what I'm eating. I had never been permitted to have anything that had caffeine in it, coffee, tea, anything like that. So I thought, she'll never know. But they were Asian men who were the waiters. And so when they asked what I would like to drink, I said I would like tea. And he said, "Milk or lemon?" I said, "Both, please." Not a change of expression, just straight face. He brought the lemon and he brought the cream. And he said, "Which would you prefer?" And I said, "Both, please." Well, of course, it curdled this mess. And I tasted it and I thought, it was years before I found out what I'd done.
That's awesome. And Jean Harlow was at your birthday party one year too.
Oh, goodness, yes.
Yes.
I knew Jean Harlow very well.
Oh, tell us about that.
Well, she and my mother were very good friends. My mother had gone on vacation on holiday somewhere, I know nowhere. But I was staying at Miss Harlow's house. And I know I was quite young because I was still calling her Miss Harlow. Mm-hmm. And I remember we were standing in the kitchen. She was cooking or something. And I said, "Oh, Miss Harlow, when I grow up, I want to have eyebrows just like yours." She said, "Are you working the next couple of weeks?" We were both under contract to MGM. I said, "Not that I'm aware of." So she said, "Come here." She brought a stool, put me up on it, and she tweezed my eyebrows. So I ended up with eyebrows that went like this. Then she drew on the eyebrows. Oh, I was so thrilled. Till we found a week went by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
They didn't grow back.
My eyebrows didn't grow out.
Oh my God.
To this day, I don't have any eyebrows beyond here.
So you have been plucked by Jean Harlow and cut by Peter Lorre.
Yes.
That's what we're getting to here. That's what
Okay.
it boils down to.
Okay.
That is so cool.
Anyway, Mr. Mayer was livid. My mother wouldn't speak to her. I said, "It's my fault. I'm the one who pleaded with her to do it. If you're going to be angry with someone, be angry with me."
You can just pencil them in, though. I mean, what's the big deal?
I've been penciling them in or drawing them in with eye powder, eyebrow powder all my life.
I do that too.
Okay.
So tell me about, all right, so you worked 6 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
You really didn't have a childhood. You
No.
didn't get to run and play and be...
Only if the character I was portraying
Did that.
was running or playing, yes.
So that had to have been very hard to not get those activities that a normal child would get.
You know what happened?
What happened?
When I left the business, which was the best single decision in my life, and had children, 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, I did everything I didn't get to do as a child. And I still can remember the faces of the owners of these theme parks. They'd see me and their eyes would roll, and I'm sure they were saying, "Here comes that ditzy woman who's going to do everything her kids do." And I did. I rode every ride. I did everything. Now, I'm acrophobic. I'm exquisitely afraid of heights. So I didn't do anything higher than a hobby horse. But that's what I did. Everything my children did.
Well, that's wonderful. So I find that there are some stars that really can't give up Hollywood and they kind of cling to it until the end. And then there's others like yourself who are able to walk away and find happiness and fulfillment and a whole other life outside of the business. What led to your leaving the business? Because your final film was Weekend at the Waldorf, right?
Yes.
From
yes.
what, 1945?
Yes.
Okay.
But it was actually shortly before that
Okay.
that I quote left films.
All right.
There was a man named Harry Ruskin. Now I had told you my parents were divorced, so I had no father figure. And Harry Ruskin was this incredibly talented writer. His name was on 50% of the films that left MGM because he had the talent. If you needed to cut 30 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, the running time, and not lose any of the value of the film, Harry Ruskin. So anyway, one day, what we all used to do on, I don't know whether a Tuesday or maybe it was a Tuesday, he would have the people he considered funny. Now that was his version. Lana Turner was one. I was lucky enough to be one. You'd see all these people, like what I'm talking about, big stars, and we'd all be standing around, eating from the bookshelves in his outer office, or on the desk in his office. Everyone, they had incredibly bad food at MGM, so he would send to Culver City some good restaurant and bring in good food. So we would all go there. Anyway, one day, he said, "Are you coming next Tuesday?" And I said, "I don't know." So he called back a couple of days later. "Are you coming next Tuesday?" I said, "Harry, I don't know yet." He called the third time. He said, "Are you going to be here Tuesday?" I said, "I'll be there Tuesday." So I walked in, and it was empty. I said, "Where is everybody?" He said, "I wrote a synopsis for you, and I want you to read it alone." And I read it, and I would have given my right arm to play that part. He knew me so well. It was so perfect for me. But I wouldn't have given my virginity, because right there came the proposition.
And you were how old?
14 and a half.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Not that it's okay at any age, but
No, but to me it was like incest because he was the father.
Oh.
The man I was closest. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. So we were arguing back and forth, and I suddenly realized I was starting to cry, and that was a sign of weakness. So I excused myself. In the interim, he had said, "Well, I don't know what's wrong with you. There are a dozen girls who'd be glad to play that part. They wouldn't play it as well." And I said, "Let them." But then I left his office, and I went down the hall. And remember, this is a long time ago.
Of course.
The first door I came to that was unlocked was a cleaning closet, because all the other doors led into somebody's office. So I pushed the furniture around and blocked the door and had a good cry. I played mop and sop, and I cleaned myself up, got myself ready, and went to Mr. Mayor's office. And I walked in, and Miss Coverman said, "Cora, so you don't have an appointment today with Mr. Mayor?" I said, "No, but obviously he's seeing people because I see people wait." I said, "I can wait," so I sat down. So I waited and waited, and pretty soon the door opened, and it was Mr. Mayor himself, which surprised me. He never opened the door. He never got up from his desk. His desk was on a dais because he was a little man, and he wanted to be taller than anybody who came in. So anybody who came in had to look up at him because he was way up there.
Intimidation tactic.
Yeah, indeed. So when he came out to get me, he himself came, which surprised me. And on the way, he's saying, "What do you think of the synopsis? Don't you think it's wonderful? Yuckity, 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 yuckity. I even have your favorite cinematographer, Jimmy Wong Howe, and so forth and so on." And I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So I thought, well, I'll just wait until he stops, and then I'll, ask him. So I said, "I'm so sorry I lost track because I suddenly thought of something else that I've got to tell you about another visit to his office." Anyway, when he said, "What do you think of the synopsis?" And I said, "But Mr. Mayor, do you know what Harry wants me to do?" Now, I told you about the big furniture. I was sitting all scrunched up in a corner of a huge black leather chair, and he came around off the desk, got off the, back of his desk, came down, sat on the arm of the chair, pulled me toward him, and he said, "You'll get used to it, sweetie." I couldn't believe it. These two men that I had known who were so important in my life could do this to me. I just couldn't believe it. So 45 minutes or so later, when Mr. Mayor was convinced that I, was not going to sleep with Harry or him, he leaned over, and he had these little short, fat fingers, and he waggled his finger under my nose, and he said, "Cora Sue, you will never work again on a sound stage as long as you live." And I said, "Mr. Mayor, that's my heartfelt desire." As I said before, to this day, the best decision of my life. It's a rotten industry. And it's not just the film industry. Unfortunately, it's any man with power or woman with power. It's the same thing. Whatever. Now, a couple of months went by. My phone rang, and I said, "Hello." He said, "How are you, Cora Sue?" I said, "Mr. Mayor, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?" And he said, "I'm making a film with all your friends, all your buddies." I said, "I know, they've all called me. You're doing Weekend at the Waldorf with all my friends." He said, "Yes." He said, "How would you like to play the bride who spends the weekend at the Waldorf?" I said, "Well, Mr. Mayor, I think you just talked me out of retirement. Thank you." So I played the part, played a couple of other parts, a couple of other films, was not at all happy. So the best decision was to leave the film industry, and that's when I left it. Period. That was the last. I made 2 other films, found out it was just as rotten as I remembered it being, and that's how I got out of the industry. But I was a lucky one.
Yeah.
Because so many girls didn't.
And you've really had a fascinating life. You speak multiple languages.
6.
You've 6 languages. You traveled the world. You are an accomplished water skier.
I love to water ski.
Tell me about your life after Hollywood and so many of the incredible things that you've done with the time.
My first husband, Jim McKay, told me about a friend. He was in the hospital with a man who was in the same hospital room. They became friends. And he told me, this is when we were engaged. He said, I have this friend I'm going to introduce you to. And he said, you're going to think he's crazy. But 6 months or so after he tells you something wild, it'll come to pass. It was Howard Hughes. I met Howard Hughes when I was maybe 16, 17 years old, whatever. Very, 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 very young. And if you've ever seen any pictures of him at that age, he was an incredibly handsome man. Charming. Charmed the birds from the trees. Women just flocked after him. He was gorgeous, and he was smart, and he was rich, and he was wonderful. So we remained friends for years and years and years. Fortunately, I didn't see him when he became so nutty with the long curling fingernails and all of that. Fortunately, I didn't see that because I saw the good part of him. He was wonderful. We used to have so much fun. In those days, the Beverly Hills still has it. They have what they call the new wing. It was a new wing when I was a little girl, which was a hell of a long time ago. At 96, believe me, I can tell you, a long time ago.
And you'll be 97 very soon.
Yes, very soon. Anyway, it was called the new wing then. It's still called the new wing. I had a suite of rooms on the second floor of that new wing where it dropped off and had a view of the mountains in back. Well, Howard Hughes' bungalow was just there where her hands are. This is where my suite was. So he would get up, and if he would see the lights on in my bedroom, because I used to read all night, if the lights were on, he'd call and he'd say, are you hungry? I was always hungry. I love room service. I knew every room service chef in the country. In my part. Anyway, so I would throw on either a negligee or a fur coat, depending on the weather, and run downstairs, and the first thing we'd do would call my husband, because Harry loved Howard, but Howard was a womanizer. He didn't trust him. So the first thing we did is I'd say, I'm visiting Howard, we're ordering room service, and then when I get ready to go back upstairs, I would call him from downstairs saying I'm on my way, and call him and I'm home in bed, okay. So that was our system. But I loved Howard. He was a delight. One time, right, my husband owned a gambling club in Reno, Nevada called the Bank Club. Like bank where you put money. And he owned a hotel, and right now I can't remember the name of the hotel, but he owned a hotel and several other things in the town. And Howard used to come and visit us, and we'd go to dinner, and then we'd come back, and he would spend the night at the hotel. Well, one night we had dinner, and I'd never seen him drink so much. In the olden days, there was a saying that said knee walking drunk, which meant that when you were so drunk that your legs wouldn't support you, you walked on your knees. Well, that's how drunk Howard was one night. And I said, Harry, we can't leave him in the hotel. God knows what will happen to him. He's impossible. So we took him home with us, and it was so long ago that they didn't have a console in the middle. There were just 2 front seats, and he sat in the middle. We kept him in the middle. I sat at the door. My husband drove. And when we got home, we finally got him inside. We had a big house. And on the ground level, you walked in the front door and you turned right, and that was our bedroom suite. And if you turned left, there was a bedroom suite over here that nobody ever used. Then you walked into, then there were guest rooms down there. So we put Howard in this suite on our level. And I mean, he was just loaded. And I remember I undid his tie and his neck, and Harry opened his trousers, and we took off his shoes and covered him up with a blanket. Next morning, 10 o'clock. He usually woke up around 10:30 or 11. 10 o'clock. 10:30. 11 o'clock. 11:30. I told my husband, I said, something wrong. We better find out what's going on because I think something's wrong with Howard. So I knocked on the door. I said, it's Cora Sue. And he said, oh, thank God. And I heard all this scratching of furniture. Finally, he opened the door. He had looked out. This ranch we had was so big. We had our own telephone company. We had our own electric company. So all the wires were buried. So he was paranoid about being kidnapped. And he decided he had been kidnapped because he didn't know where he was. So anyway, that was my funniest story about Howard.
Tell me the story about the Brown Derby, because you know I love the Brown Derby, and I've always been fascinated by it. I wish it was still with us today.
Well, let's see now. Brown Derby, I was being interviewed, and the Brown Derby had U-shaped banquettes like this, and a walkway, and U-shaped that faced them. And my mother and this lady, who was a journalist, were there. And they wanted to go to the ladies' room, my mother and this journalist. Would I like? And I said, no, thank you. So they left. Hedy Lamarr was right across the way from me. So as soon as I was sure they were safely in the bathroom, I jumped up and I said, hello, Miss Lamarr. And she said, hello, Cora. How are you? And I said, very well, thank you. I said, your mother's still in Germany, isn't she? They said, yes, she is. How did you know? And I said, well, if she'd been here, she would have told you that it's very rude to take that big white comb out of your handbag and comb your hair and put it down on the table with all those black hairs on it. Do you know that sweet lady realized that I was only telling her this because if her mother had been there, her mother would have told her that, and I didn't want her to be embarrassed. We remained friends until she died. She was the sweetest lady. Wow. She was a wonderful lady. Want to hear a story about Hedy Lamarr?
When do I not? Yes, of course.
All right. Not Hedy Lamarr, I meant Lana Turner.
Of course, of course.
All right. As I told you, Lana was a very good friend of my mother's. I had a home in Acapulco, and Lana used to go there skiing, and Lana loved to dance. And there were all these nightclubs, and she could rumba and cha-cha and all the Latin dances, and boy, could she move. And she loved to dance. So she would come and visit, but she would stay in a hotel, and we'd visit and so forth. She came down one time, and she said, what's wrong with Melinda? I said, Melinda has, one of my daughters, Melinda has bronchitis. She said, well, what are you doing for her? And I said, the poor kid, I feel so sorry for her. She's bedridden. I said, I can't let her out of bed. For 2 weeks, Lana Turner, the sex symbol of the world, came over every day around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, stayed until about 9 o'clock at night, giving my daughter a manicure and a pedicure and a manicure and a pedicure to keep her happy in bed. Now that's the real Lana Turner.
Wow.
Sweet woman. No, I was really fortunate in that I had such wonderful friends.
And now you've kind of come full circle in that you left Hollywood, you had a family, you had interests, you had a terrific life post Hollywood.
Yes.
But now you frequently still do appearances at places like the UCLA Film and TV Archive or Turner Classic Movies Festival, where you see your old films and you talk about them. So how does it feel to kind of revisit those years so many decades later?
Well, it's unusual because for many years of my life, anyone would refer to my career and I'd say, that belongs in yesterday's newspaper. That's what you wrap the trash in. And I would change the subject. Now, one day, I had a friend who who had a very large collection of Jean Harlow memorabilia. And he asked if I would go, because he knew I was a friend of Jean's, if I would go and talk about her. And I said, if anecdotal things that we did together, nothing concerning my career, okay, I'll do that. So I did that. We went there. And I told all these funny stories because she was a delight that had happened to us. And the auction started. And the auction was going like gangbusters. I was looking around. I wanted to go home. And I needed, before the day of cell phones, I'm thinking, how am I going to get a car to take me home? So I looked around and I finally found a wall with 3 chairs on it. Nobody there. So I thought, well, I'll go sit there. So I sat there. And I was sitting there and I saw 2 really very nice looking men walking toward me. And they came closer. And the one in the front came up and said, you're Cora Sue Collins. Well, I've been using the name Cora Sue Nace. And I said, yes. He said, in 1935, L.B. Mayer gave you a birthday party with May robes in because your birthdays are both on April the 19th. And I looked at him, I thought, is he a stalker? My daughter doesn't know this. It's ridiculous. Well, he was a sweet man, but this man is a Harlow collector, big time. And the reason he wanted to meet me was I have an autograph book that was given to me on April the 19th by May Robeson at this party that he mentioned that L.B. Mayer gave us. And he wanted to see this autograph book because Jean Harlow had signed it. And Jean Harlow was famous for never signing anything. Her mother signed everything for her. So he wanted to see this book. So anyway, he finally told me why, and I said, yes, come over. So he came. So it worked out very well for me because he and the other friend, Darren, taught me that my childhood had not been all bad. And I realized that in retrospect, every little girl wants to play dress up. And here I was not only playing dress up, I was being dressed by the most famous designers in the world, the most famous makeup artists, directors. I had a wonderful, I won't call it childhood, but I had a wonderful epoch, whatever. Different than anybody else, but yes. But I thank them very much. So now I can talk about it. In fact, look at me. You can't shut me up. I enjoyed it.
Well, I am happy to listen to you all day, every day, because you're really fantastic.
Thank you, Karie. It's such fun to see you, dear.
Thank you so much, Cora Sue, for chatting with me today, and thank you so much to Film Masters.
And I enjoyed it very much. We'll see you again soon.